We live in a very mysterious universe. For example, how was the universe even created, right? It's one of the biggest mysteries of all time. Like, how did we get something from nothing? Another mystery is the origin of consciousness. How are we conscious? Why are we conscious? And where does it come from? What about human evolution? See, mainstream science can explain how we became human. They can explain the doubling of the brain size. They can't explain how we went from supposedly being tree-dwelling apes to now humans who drive cars, surf the internet, talk on cell phones, and supposedly even go to the moon. We also can explain how the pyramids were built, who built them, and why. And right up there with those mysteries is the mystery of ayahuasca. How was it created and why? See, mainstream science, or at least the mainstream idea of how ayahuasca was created, was that it was the process of trial and error. Now, those of you that know anything about anything know that that is probably the dumbest explanation in the history of explanations. See, if you don't know, ayahuasca comes from the jungle, the Amazon jungle, and there are somewhere around 40,000 different plant species in the jungle, many of them poisonous. So why would our ancient ancestors randomly try a combination of plants? See, let me take a step back for a second and explain how ayahuasca works. See, ayahuasca is a tea made from two different plants. The vine, the Banisterius caapi vine, aka the ayahuasca vine, and the leaves of a plant called chacruna. Now, the leaves of chacruna contain DMT, a very powerful psychotropic substance. But here's the thing where it gets interesting, is that DMT is not orally active, meaning that you could take a bunch of chacruna leaves and eat them, blend them up, make a smoothie with them, and drink it down, and nothing would happen. And this is because we have an enzyme in our stomach called monoamine oxidase. And that enzyme breaks down the DMT and does not allow it to pass the blood-brain barrier. So then how does ayahuasca work? Well, here's where it gets interesting. See, the vine contains an MAOI, which is a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which means that the vine breaks down or inhibits this enzyme in our stomach, which then allows the DMT to become orally active. So there's a reason for these two plants. They work synergistically very well. And again, going back to how was this discovered, because that's fascinating when you learn this. Here's why randomly mixing or randomly trying or testing out different plants is a dumb idea, because you would have to know what you were looking for. And oh, by the way, the earliest record of ayahuasca use is over 1,000 years ago. And that's because supposedly they found some bag in a cave and they tested the bag and it had ayahuasca residue. But I believe that it's been in use much older, possibly 4,000, 10,000 years, who knows? But what the mainstream narrative tells us about even 1,000 years ago is that there was no science, there was no microscopes, there was no internet, there was nothing, just primitive people living in the jungle. So in order to discover ayahuasca, they would have to know what they were looking for. One, they would have to know that a substance like DMT existed. They would also have to know that there's an enzyme in our stomach which does not allow DMT to be orally active. And then they would also have to know that there's a plant or an inhibitor, a substance that can inhibit that enzyme. So how would they know this? That's the mystery, right? Well, if you ask the Shipibo, the tribe I was trained with, they will say that the plants told them, which kind of leaves more questions than answers. And if you press them even more on that, there's a lot of mythology around how ayahuasca was discovered. And one of the myths is that tobacco told them. And see, tobacco, if you don't know, tobacco is a very masculine plant, and ayahuasca is a very feminine spirit. So many people call ayahuasca the grandmother, and vice versa. Many people call tobacco the grandfather. So tobacco is a very powerful medicinal plant. Like I said, it could even be considered the king of medicinal plants, which is why just about every indigenous culture on the planet uses tobacco. So anyway, one of the myths from the Shipibo is that the spirit of tobacco told them how to make ayahuasca. And while that's super interesting, you have to wonder about how they even discovered tobacco in the first place, right? How did they decide to find a particular plant, look at those leaves, think we should pick those leaves, we should dry them out, we should roll them up, and then we should smoke them? So what this essentially, what we're getting down to is this idea of the analogy of turtles all the way down. But what this really means is that there's intelligence in nature. So when the Shipibo tell me that the plants told them about ayahuasca and taught them about ayahuasca, I believe them, because the nature is alive and plant spirits are real. See, this to our Western mind sounds crazy, but those people, those of you that spend time in nature, those of you that have spent time with plant medicine know that this is not crazy talk, that this is real. And I believe that our ancestors were connected to nature, and nature was our teacher, and we humans worked synergistically with nature. But in the Western world, we've lost contact with nature. And that's why we see a lot of sickness and depression and illness, because we are no longer in connection and in communication with nature. So this is all to say, and this is to challenge you to find that connection, to get back into the natural world, to listen to the plants, to the rivers, to the mountains, to the animals, and reconnect with your natural self. See you on the other side.